well, a similar mask, maybe not the same mask from last week. I do wash my mask. Be responsible with your mask usage. I did want to talk to you just really quickly, though, about printmaking. And we are going to be doing a relief print next week. So I wanted to show you what that process looks like so that you're not confused when you come into the classroom on Monday or Thursday. Remember, we are splitting classes still. So you will either be here on Monday if you came on Monday last week, or on Thursday. And you may be coming in at 8:55 or 9:30. It's dependent on what time you came in last week. If you have any questions, remember you can email me at brienne.fultonmiller@ottawa.edu. I had to think about it. It's Friday, guys. Okay, let's get started with some printmaking.
All right, so I'm getting started, and I did a little bit of prep work first, as you can see in this video, and I have sped up the video just to keep it a little quicker. But I did a drawing first. I just did it on regular computer paper. Notebook paper would also be fine. And I kept it about a 4x5 size because that is the size of that foam printing block that I just put over the drawing. Now, because I have text, and yes, I know that's not the correct spelling of the word small, I wanted to use kind of the meme-ified version of it because I thought it was cute along with the picture. But if I'm using text, I'm going to have to pre-draw it. Because I'm going to have to reverse it for the printing block. With relief printing, you always have to reverse text. It's not such a big deal if you have like a drawing or a cartoon that gets reversed. But if you don't reverse your text, it's going to print backwards when you do the actual print. So I drew with permanent markers so that I could see through easily. I turned the paper over. And you can see that I'm using my pen and just tracing what I've already done with that foam block underneath. And what this is doing is it's giving me a little impression of every line that I made on my drawing in the actual foam block. With relief printing, the area that sinks is always going to leave blank spots. So I know when I choose my colors that if I use white paper and say use like a red ink, the rabbit will be red, the surrounding environment will be red, and then any areas that I sink in, including those eyes, which I've made pretty dark, the outlines of the rabbit, the text, all of that will appear in white. Now, when you all come over, you will have the opportunity to work with a multitude of colors of paper, and then we have primary colors, red, yellow, and blue for inks. And so you can think about like how this is going to look like when you're drawing in. Now, like I said, I'm using kind of like this tracing method to transfer to my block. This would be a really natural way that any, relief printmaker might work, whether they're working on linoleum or blocks of wood. They may put chalk down on the other side of their paper and then press into it, and then use materials to carve into that block. Since we're working with styrofoam, and styrofoam is so soft, all I have to do is use the pen. And that's going to make some lines for me that I can use as a guide, and I can draw in deeper if I want to later as I'm working on this process. Okay, so just starting to carve here into my letters, following those. And then of course on my block, they're going to be reversed, but then I'm going to reverse them again for the actual image. Here goes my paper, and you can't really see what I've done. Now, you don't have to do this step necessarily. I do this almost every time I do foam block printing, just because when I transfer my image, a lot of times my lines don't end up deep enough, so I want to deepen them more so I get a good contrast between the areas that I'm drawing in that I don't want to accept ink, and then the surrounding areas that will accept ink. Also, I'm doing this just so you can see exactly what's going on with my block as I'm printing. Okay, so filling in those eyes. This is also a good time that I can make any adjustments to the design. So say I want to make, the eyes a little larger, or I want to add in some textures. I could make some of my lines a little larger to make it look like the rabbit has more fur. And in fact, here at the moment, I'm making the line underneath sort of the mouth and the nose a little thicker because it makes a bit of a shadow. It'll create a little more contrast in the actual final design. Getting those ears in there. And remember, when I'm looking at my block, that I already have a lot of these lines there from that tracing process. So it's not like I just, traced and then have to do it all over again. I have a guide there that I can see that's not maybe so apparent in the video. Now for some of you, if you're not wanting to incorporate any text into your design at all, say you just want it to be, an image of a house or rabbit or whatever you'd like, because you can be creative with this and do what you want, even like an abstract pattern would be fine. You may not need to do that transfer process that I just did. You can actually use a pen and draw like I am right now directly into that piece of foam that you'll get during class this week. And I will have those available for everyone. Now you don't have to have fancy foam blocks to do this kind of printing. You could even take like a styrofoam plate or like the top of like a styrofoam container and cut it out and use that as a printing block as well if you ever wanted to do this on your own. And you don't necessarily have to have fancy inks. Now I have some decent water-soluble inks in the studio that we'll use, but you could buy probably cheap acrylic paints, and as long as you have the ability to roll them onto the block, you could do this over and over and over again for very little money. It doesn't cost much necessarily to do this. Relief printing has been around for a very long time. There is a video in our lectures that I'm providing supplements to our lectures that we'll have this week that'll be on Collaborate, where you can actually see artists work in a very traditional way. The oldest type of really traditional printmaking goes back to Japan. And there's an artist, a contemporary artist in the videos, who is working from the influence of a guy named Hokusai, who did a really popular piece that you may have even seen before in your life called The Great Wave. You can see Mount Fuji in the background. There's this huge wave and a boat in the wave in the front. And Hokusai would actually carve into blocks, and then he would carve into several blocks for one print to add on one color, and then another, and then another, and another, in a very particular way. Now, we're not going to be that particular. We're just going to do one color block printing. But if you do that, if you have multiple blocks that are meant to go together and they fit together kind of like a puzzle on a piece of paper, you have to think about their layout and their size. You have to think about where they might overlap and how you'll overlap those colors, what you want to be the background, what you want to be the foreground. And that process is called, and I'll talk about this in the Collaborate lecture, registration. But you're not going to need to worry about that for your own design. So you can see here I actually added some extra things. I'm adding some little hatch marks into the shadows. Hallmark of printmaking usually is some kind of hatching for value. Not always, but often. Okay, I also gave the bunny a little bow tie because I'm a twerp and I thought it was cute. Especially with his little, internet. Ooh, small. I'm small. This rabbit almost ended up looking a little bit more mouse-like, but that's fine. We're both rodents, right? Okay, so a few more details thrown in, just making it a little bit more involved than it was in that original drawing. Okay, but my drawing definitely helped to be a guide. All right, so I'm getting ready to print. I've selected a colored paper, and I thought about the contrast of the color that was to go on the top. I also have this thing called a brayer. Okay, I also have something to press the paper down into the block to squeeze the ink in between the two. Now with printmaking, often you need to have some kind of press, and presses are pretty expensive. A large one may cost you up to $10,000. You can get small ones sometimes for a couple $100s, but for the purposes of relief printing, you don't necessarily need to have an actual press to do it. So this can be a really affordable way to work with printmaking that won't break the bank. Okay, so I'm using my ink. You saw my ink before. Just comes in like almost like a paint tube. Okay, and I'm using the brayer, which is just a little roller, to roll across my ink. And you can see it tripped up on me a little bit there, which is a little more dramatic considering that the video's sped up just a little bit. Okay, so I've coated my block. You notice that my ink didn't go into the lines that I made with the pen. That's exactly where you want it to be. You want a good sticky amount of it on your block. And then I turned it over, lined it up on my paper, and then I'm using this device to just really press that block into place so that the paper really accepts the ink. Now you can also use your hand. Some people who do very informal types of printmaking may even use like a spoon, something like that. I'm checking my edges and then peeling back. Okay, and sorry for the unsteady image. We get a little bit of a print there. So it's not perfect, and you can see that I missed some edges, but it's all right. And voila! There you go, as I accidentally hit my tripod. That's printmaking. You can do it.